Welcome, everyone. Looks like we have a good crowd joining us today, over 40 of you, and I'm sure there'll be some more trickling in. But thank you for joining us. For those of you who are new to this webinar series, it's hosted by the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council and the University of Tennessee. I'm with TUFC, and Katie is with UT. Today we have Jaq Payne from the National Tree Champion Program. But before we get started, I'm going to pass it on to Katie for a little bit of housekeeping.
All right, hello everyone. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. So if you are attending this webinar and you are hoping to receive International Society of Arboriculture CEUs, please make sure that you are registered and that you have paid the $10 if you are not a member of the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council. Also, to make it easier for us to verify that you're receiving CEUs, please make sure your full name is showing to receive credit. You can do that by going to the participants button at the bottom of the Zoom window, find your name in the participants list, and then change it to whatever name you used when you were registering. That way, again, it just makes it easier for us to verify people who registered and are receiving those CEU credits. Again, if you're just a general attendee, you're not trying to get CEUs, you do not have to pay the $10. And if you're a member of the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council, you also do not have to pay the $10. During the webinar, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Jaq, we will have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please insert those into the chat and we will ask those at the end of the webinar. And I think that's it. Kevin, is there anything I missed?
Nope, I think that's about it. Thanks, Katie. All right, Jaq, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to hear you speak. And so I'll pass it on to you.
Super. All right, let me pull my little screen up. Here we go. Make sure that I can see what I'm doing here. All right, can we see it okay?
Looks good.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to talk to y'all about how we can use charismatic trees for education and conservation. I'm going to talk about what a charismatic species even is, some of the research about effective environmental education, what conservation of trees and forests can look like in our current culture, what the Champion Tree Program does, and how we can apply these concepts for educating the public and inspiring conservation movements. But first, I'm going to take y'all to Maryland. Right about February of 1973, around the Tuckahoe Creek in Maryland, pictured here, a group of local nature enthusiasts waded through the swampy muck threaded with vines and sharp-pointed briars with the purpose of finding a tree that had, by this point, passed into legend. The stakes were high and time was short. The state of Maryland was planning on turning this wild wetland into a 4,000-acre recreational park featuring parking lots, dams, artificial lakes, hotels, picnic grounds, and, quote, man-made nature demonstration areas. These intrepid, conservationist-minded explorers obviously had some opinions about this planned development, but faced strong opposition from the developers with deep pockets and the dollar signs floating in front of the eyes of local politicians hungry for the moneyed vacationers this proposed park would draw in. Many months into the planning stage, some locals spoke up about a mythical tree, an oak tucked deep into the marsh, growing steadily for an estimated 400 years. The Tuckahoe Oak, as it was called, supposedly stood on a patch of wetland that would be 5 feet underwater once the artificial lake was filled up. On this particular gloomy February Saturday, hiking under the chill and the weight of the knowledge that this paradise would soon be paved over and submerged under an artificial lake, the oak hunters made their way through icy pools of water, stepping onto rotted logs that collapsed under the weight of their feet, dragging their shoes through shin-deep mud until finally someone shouted, "There it is!" Quoting from the American Forest article written by Dickinson J. Preston, one of those intrepid explorers. In a moment, we all sighted its base, a vast, clean-lined trunk rising straight up from enormous roots for nearly 30 feet before the first branch appeared. The underbrush was so heavy that we were within 75 yards of it before we spotted it. And not until we were directly beneath it could we see and appreciate its magnificent height and crown. For a moment, we just stood and looked. Nobody said anything. It was an almost unbelievable sight. Primeval giant, which had been growing here in this swamp, unknown and unsung. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Unknown and unsung since before the province of Maryland existed. And now it was doomed. As we watched, spellbound, a great horned owl flew out from the upper trunk and soared across to another tree, where it sat and glared at us. Beth Hartland turned to me. "This tree," she said, almost with a sob in her voice, "is worth more than the whole darned park." They contacted the coordinator of the Maryland State Champion Tree Program at the time, a program that recognized and honored the largest trees in the state. So they called up Earl Yingling and asked about the Tuckahoe oak. He had seen it, and he had actually just measured it a couple weeks before, and he clocked it as a swamp white oak. In fact, he thought it was the biggest swamp white oak, not just in the state, but in the whole country, a national champion. So they went back out with a photographer and more tree experts, and soon after, the Baltimore Sun ran a story, Champion Oak in Peril. They contacted American Forest to get it certified as a national champion, and Richard Pardo, American Forest Programs Director at the time, certified it as the biggest reported specimen of swamp white oak in the country, and certified that it qualifies as national champion of the species. Pardo also said, in support of its preservation, "These champion trees are truly superlatives of nature, something that man cannot replace or reproduce even within several lifetimes, even with the most sophisticated technology. This, we believe, is more than ample justification for their preservation as true wonders of nature." That was the turning point. With the weight of public pressure building against the destruction of this gentle giant, this ancient wonder, the developers started to sweat. The conservationists knew that the development itself could not be stopped entirely, but the plans could still be altered to protect the Tuckahoe Creek and the majestic Tuckahoe Oak. Rather than damming the whole area for that deep artificial lake, they could restore an old dam and mill pond which had previously stood on the property and rebuild that old mill to be a tourist attraction. And so they did. And they created a special wooden walkway for park visitors to get to appreciate the once mythical Tuckahoe Oak up close. Now a very real and present connection to the oft-hidden natural treasures of our world. So now, fast forwarding to the present moment, what does conservation of forests and trees look like in our modern age? And why is it important? We're facing increased urbanization. A great majority of trees are lost to development or land use changes, so that's the direct human component. But they're also facing biotic and abiotic threats, things that are living and non-living. Non-native invasive species are one of those biotic threats. They're responsible for blights, infestations, devouring the landscape with no natural predators to slow them down. Pictured here is the emerald ash borer, which is devastating our ash trees across the country. Abiotic stuff, we're thinking about environmental factors like climate change. Trees are dying out in the southern and exposed areas of their ranges, but the more northern and higher altitude trees are fine. And in fact, these trees will be fine if they move even further north, but they just don't walk that fast. So their ranges, the amount of places where conditions are right for them to grow, are shrinking. Our human actions are impacting both the biotic and abiotic threats. Our actions affect the world around us. Some bugs travel in wood, so bringing firewood with you when you travel can bring those bugs along for the ride and introduce them to a whole new restaurant. So we spread this messaging of don't take firewood with you, just buy it near your destination and leave it behind if you don't use it all. We're also impacting the abiotic threats. Trees are dying in the southern ends of their ranges, but we can start planting trees further north than they've traditionally grown. That's called assisted migration and can look like everyday homeowners hearing about a beautiful species that's new in town and ready to mingle. But how do we convey these challenges to the average person to get them to care? And how do we get them to make choices that positively impact our shared biosphere? Enter the idea of the charismatic species. In the world of wildlife conservation, these charismatic species are well known. Pandas, tigers, lions, elephants. These are the species that are beautiful and interesting and capture the attention of the public in a way that bats and worms just don't. Like the uncharismatic animal species of the world, trees are often unseen in our landscapes and even more unseen than most animals. You're probably familiar with the concept of plant blindness, or the modern renaming of it, plant awareness disparity. People have a hard time seeing plants and don't think about them as necessary components of our landscapes, our individual and collective lives, and our biosphere as a whole. The classic example is showing people a picture like this and asking them what's in the picture. They will list ducks, water, fluff, but it usually takes them much longer to mention grass, despite that taking up around half of the frame. People just don't see it. Researchers Balding and Williams identify a few different reasons that this happened. Plants don't move that much, at least not according to our perception of time and space, and they kind of blend into this amorphous green background behind all of the movement going on, which we correlate with life. It's sometimes hard for people to remember that even a still plant is a living thing. But beyond their appearance and our evolutionary hardwiring to pay attention to things in rapid motion, we have a cultural deficit as well. It's not unique to American culture to not prioritize relationships with plants, but there are cultures that are more connected with the plant world and form much stronger bonds with plants on an individual and a society level, even some to the point of considering them kin, without the hierarchy of people first, plants much lower down the list of importance. It's non-hierarchical that my life is not worth more than an oak's life, and that the oak's life is not worth more than mine. In general, plant conservation initiatives receive significantly less funding than animal conservation initiatives for these reasons and more. So how do we increase our cultural understanding and appreciation of trees? How do we make them more present and important to people? The research shows that people are more likely to support conservation of species that are human-like, and that we can increase that support by encouraging folks to have empathy for non-human species by anthropomorphizing them. Anthropomorphization means we attribute human traits to non-human beings. We get people to see them by making them seeable, connecting them to people's lived experience. Science as a whole frowns upon the anthropomorphization of plants and animals. There are some good reasons to be cautious of applying our human lens to the plant and animal world. First off, what does it even mean to be a human? The more we try to define this category of beings to the exclusion of all other beings, the slipperier that definition becomes. Humans use tools, just like crows. Humans use language. Many animal species use language, and plants are able to communicate with each other and other beings through chemical signals, vibrations, light, colors, and even sometimes sound. Trying to understand plant and animal behavior in the context of human behavior can lead to erroneous conclusions and can even result in reduced conservation activity for the beings that are really different to us, the ones that are hard to humanize, and the beings that are predatory of the plants and animals that we have humanized. It can set us up for failure in terms of expectations of what these anthropomorphized beings can and will do. So when the cute monkey that gives gifts, just like people do, starts stealing wallets, stealing stuff from people, and fighting with each other and with humans for resources, the animals get punished for not playing by society's rules, which they are fully unaware of as non participants in our society. So we've got to be thoughtful about how and when we apply this method of increasing empathy between the human and more than human world. However, these risks are generally lower for plants than for animals. First off, it's significantly less likely that a plant is going to steal your wallet. Plant behaviors are usually pretty self-contained and slow-moving. There's a big conversation to be had about invasive and displaced species, but we generally aren't giving native tree species as trendy Christmas gifts and then releasing them into the wild when they become unmanageable as pets. We still run the risk of creating human-centric conservation activities that might not be in the best interest of the biosphere as a whole, but when applied thoughtfully and carefully, this can be a really effective technique for building empathy and moving conservation initiatives forward. How do we do this ethically and effectively? Balding and Williams, two researchers, recommend that folks who want to employ anthropomorphization in conservation should, first off, emphasize the characteristics that the species already possesses that people engage with during personal interactions that form the egomorphic, empathetic, and charismatic basis for anthropomorphization. And two, give the species just enough recognizably human-like characteristics to make it a credible and positive social actor given its intended role. So don't go making up things that the plant doesn't actually do. Keep it limited to what's present and relevant in both the human's life and the plant's life. And don't overdo it. Remember that this being exists as a part of the whole. So let's keep that in our toolbox and look at what else has historically been effective for environmental education. Ardoin et al. Identified a few different aspects of effective environmental education. A focus on localized issues or locally relevant dimensions of broader issues, collaboration with scientists, resource managers, and/or community organizations, integrated action elements, and intentional measurement and reporting structures. Put another way, is it relevant to me and my community? Is it a collaborative experience involving experts and members of the community who are experts about their own lived experiences and often the history and context of the area? Does it involve action outside of just being told about the topic, either directly or indirectly impacting the environment through citizen science, service learning, project-based learning, problem-based learning, place-based learning, and issue investigation? And is the program itself being evaluated for effectiveness? Our behavior changes when we're being watched and measured, and we can't improve what we can't measure. This component results in more intentionally designed and more effective educational experience. France and Meyer note that connectedness to nature is highly correlated with environmentally responsible behavior. People who feel like they are a part of the natural world rather than some false sense of separation tend to make better decisions about how they move through the world and the impact that they as an individual have on the world around them. So now we're going to bring this all together. How can we use charismatic individual trees as a tool for public education and conservation of trees and associated plants? We don't really have charismatic species of trees that are universally loved and recognized and adored, but I believe that champion trees could fill that niche. First off, what even is the National Champion Tree Program? You probably got a clue from the story that I started out with, but the Champion Tree Program keeps the record of the largest trees in the country. It started in the early 1940s as a magazine competition to see who could find the biggest trees in the United States. And now every state except for Hawaii has their own champion tree program, although some are much more active than others. Trees enter this competition for the national championship when they're nominated either by members of the public or by the state champion tree program. Anybody can nominate a tree, especially to their own state's champion tree program. Public nominations for the national program will be open early next year, and we'll have more info about that on our website, nationalchampiontree.org. I'll have that link again at the end. So how do we determine what are the biggest trees? We use a point system. Trees get 1 point for each foot of height, 1 point for each inch of circumference, and a quarter point for each foot of crown spread. Each species gets its own champion, so the member of that species with the highest total number of points becomes that species champion. If the points are super close, they can become co-champions and share the title. We actually have 4 co-champion willow oaks because they're so similar in size at their largest size that we have found. So our measure of bigness isn't about which is the tallest tree or which casts the largest shadow, but the one that maximizes that points formula to the highest number of points. Most of modern tree conservation focuses heavily on tree planting, which is super important. We need a diversity of species and ages in our forests, and we need to be replenishing the vast amount of trees lost to deforestation, land use changes, and pests and diseases. However, that can't be the only way that we think about tree conservation. It's like the dam has these huge holes in it, and water is pouring through those holes, and we're trying to fix that by pouring more water into the lake rather than by plugging the holes. One of my goals with the Champion Tree Program is to change the conversation around conservation from plant more trees to protect. One of the ways that we can approach that is through education. First, I'm going to talk about some of the educational opportunities here and how we can apply them most impactfully, and then I'm going to get into the conservation side of it. This program has so much potential to be used as part of the outdoor classroom. We usually use a laser range finder or a hypsometer for measuring tree height and crown spread, but you can get a pretty good estimation with just a stick and your body and the properties of similar triangles. If you have a clinometer to measure the angle, you can even work in some trigonometry. It is a beautiful meeting of math and environmental science. Anytime you can integrate nature concepts with what students are learning in school, you're going to reinforce their already acquired knowledge, provide them a new lens to view their studies through, and give them some of those essential childhood nature experiences that are absolutely vital to being an adult that cares about the natural. So we regularly do educational programs with kids in 4-H, FFA, and other youth-focused organizations to bring these theoretical mathematical concepts into reality by measuring a tree wherever we are, be it a school, campsite, park, or even someone's yard. And we don't just do math, we also work to identify the species that rely on the specific tree, like the catalpa worm pictured in the upper left corner that loves hanging out on the catalpa tree. Just the act of getting these kids up close and personal with these trees and teaching them about the species and their names can help to open their eyes to the plants around them and reduce some of that plant awareness disparity. So we localize it by starting where we are and work directly with the organizers of these community groups whenever possible and bring in local experts. Like this middle picture is from YACE, the Youth Arboriculture Career Expo that we helped put together in Washington, D.C. this past spring. Local arborists came to Gallaudet University to show students directly how they do their jobs, opening the students up to a world that they might never have been able to picture themselves in, and teaching them the value of stewarding our trees with intention. There's also some cool stuff going on in states outside of Tennessee and outside of Washington, D.C. With our program, the integrated action piece is usually the measurement of the tree. With the kids, we measure a tree nearby. Can't get more local than that. Joseph Bennett, our New Jersey state coordinator, holds an annual New Jersey Big Tree Hunt where they kick things off with a big old party featuring games and activities. And then all the people go out into the world to see who can find the biggest tree in a few short weeks and win a prize for the top big trees found. This is this year's winners pictured here with their big trees and the prizes. This dovetails nicely with the program's goals of homeowner education, as many of the people engaged in the big tree hunt are adults that own property that the trees live on, or arborists who work with homeowners to take care of their trees. When we talk about hunting for these big trees, we can also talk about what these trees are doing for the environment and for us, and we can talk about the best way to take care of them, preferably with a certified arborist and not just a guy with a truck and a chainsaw. I gotta plug in my computer here. 1 second. There we go. Again, it's locally focused, and in this case, within the state of New Jersey, although many communities and municipalities do something similar. I believe Nashville has the Big Old Tree Contest, and the New Jersey Big Tree Hunt involves experts, members of the New Jersey Forest Service, as well as community members. From the national program side of things, we want to equip our state coordinators and our local community partners with the resources they need to effectively reach communities. This can look like grant writing for equipment purchases, helping build local partnerships, and providing educational materials and opportunities that are relevant to their state's priorities. If you're running a larger organization, you can be thinking about how you can support local initiatives and partnerships, which can be of great benefit when it comes to effectively educating and engaging the public. Now to conservation. The champion tree question that I get the most often is, what's the biggest tree? The answer to that is General Sherman out on the West Coast. General Sherman is our largest tree by points. It's 275 feet tall with a trunk circumference of 102.5 feet. That's a diameter of about 32 feet. The average arm span of a human is about 66 inches, so it would take around 19 people to fully hug General Sherman. Stretch your arms out as far as they go and imagine 18 other folks linked hands with you. That's a big tree. We love General Sherman. The second most common question that I get is, can you protect my tree? The short answer to that is no, I can't protect your tree, and the Champion Tree Program can't really protect it either. We don't provide any legal status to a tree, just an honorary recognition. And sometimes trees need to be removed. Trees, just like humans, have a finite lifespan, and the closer they get to the end of their lives, the more likely they are to fail dramatically in a way that injures people and structures around them. Sometimes they're a host for disease, and more trees can be saved by removing this one specimen, that classic trolley problem. Sometimes the tree is just growing in the wrong place at the wrong time, like under a power line or too closely to a house. But we also need trees for our health and well-being and environment. So how do we protect and preserve the ones that we want to keep around? Whenever someone approaches me about how to save the tree that they love so much, whether it's a champion or not, I always tell them to start by giving the tree a name. What's the biggest tree in the US? I just told you his name. It's General Sherman. In our culture, names hold a lot of weight and meaning. It doesn't even have to be a human name. The tree that I mentioned that those folks were trying to save in the 70s was the Tuckahoe oak. Many people revere a local grandmother oak. There was a tree that I grew up biking to halfway in between mine and my best friend's house that we both called Greenleaf. By giving it a name, we give it an identity beyond tree. It is no longer a part of the background, but a recognized member of our community. Once the tree has a name, it's easy to share stories about them in the local news and within communities. Local and state news have a strong effect on public opinion and can be wielded to highlight the threats facing our community members and galvanize a response. This is a way to humanize or anthropomorphize those individuals with minimum work and maximum positive impact. The next thing that we're doing is we are communicating the value of this tree to the local movers and shakers. This can be approached on multiple fronts. Who are the decision makers when it comes to what happens with that property? That might be developers, landowners, city council, neighbors. Who are the experts in the community that might know about its historical importance or its ecological value? Bringing in scientists who can testify to the impact these trees are having on the environment, bringing in historians who can put the lifespan of the tree into a historical context, bringing in resource managers who can create plans to actively manage lands where remarkable trees stand, bringing in community organizers who can foster community support and public action. These are all part of effective environmental education and conservation. We have to meet people where they are and speak in the language that people understand. For some folks, leaning on the aesthetic beauty can be impactful, but for most municipalities, it comes down to the money and the livability of our developed areas. That's where it makes sense to lean on the ecosystem services, those things that trees do that benefit us and the environment that we share. We can use champion trees to talk about all these different aspects, from the economic aspect of energy savings and cooling effects from the shade provided by trees, super important in our hot, hot cities. A larger tree has more leaves, which means more leaf machines doing that good work, evapotranspirating and cooling an area while also removing air pollution. We can talk about stormwater runoff reduction, how all the water interrupted by the root system, which spreads about 2 to 4 times the size of the crown of the tree. So a 100-foot crown could potentially have a root system that spans up to 2 acres, especially if it's connected with other root systems from similar trees. That's super important in our flooding and drought-stricken areas, and usually much less expensive than man-made solutions to flooding. We can talk about a one tree forest, where we're thinking about all the different types of wildlife that rely on this individual tree for shelter, food, resources, etc. As we talked about earlier, it can be hard to get people to care about plants, but people love to hear the songbirds. I think about Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, which was so massively influential on the public and really changed people's behavior and perceptions of pesticides by highlighting the ways that trees had fallen silent under their misuse. This is also a great place to think about humanizing these trees. Cutting down a tree is easy. Cutting down a grandmother tree is just a little bit harder. So we're thinking about communicating the value of these individual trees in a way that makes sense for the audience that we're approaching in our local community. Remember, effective environmental education is locally relevant. And public pressure matters a lot, especially on the local level. It doesn't always work, but we do have so much power within our communities. This tree pictured here was actually the entirety of the Kansas State Forest in 1980. Their first state forest was 1.5 acres in size and contained just this one tree, the Louisville elm. This beautiful elm outside of Kansas City was part of a right-of-way easement that was about to be torn apart for a bridge reconstruction and a new road, but they saved it by recognizing it as a state and national champion, and were able to get the plans changed to preserve this tree and the land signed over to the state of Kansas as their first official state forest. The tree is unfortunately long gone now, but now Kansas owns 190,000 acres of forests, woodlands, and windbreaks. I mentioned before that the Champion Tree Program doesn't provide any legal protections. It's just an honorary designation. However, big however on this, local ordinances can provide direct legal protection. It depends on the state. Some municipalities aren't allowed to make tree protection ordinances based on their state legislature, but for most of the US and here in Tennessee, we have a lot of power on the local level. Our Knoxville City ordinances require a permit to remove or substantially alter a champion tree, but it requires the community to speak up on behalf of that tree. Even without a local ordinance specifically protecting champion trees, we've seen that champion trees can be protected by community members working together to change people's minds about developing an area. So there's another way to incorporate that integrated action element. Documenting these trees and their impact, showing up to city council, to tree board meetings if your city has one of those, and changing how things are done. It can be done, and it has been done to great effect. The final step is that intentional measurement and reporting. What worked? What didn't? What lessons would you pass on to the next group of people trying this? What would you do differently if you were doing it again in another place? We have to work together and learn from past experiences so that we can build best practices moving forward. There's no single solution, no one size fits all program, because each situation, each community is so different. But the methods and the messages often rhyme. The Tuckahoe oak is unfortunately no longer with us. At some point, they discovered it actually wasn't a swamp white oak, but was in fact an overcup oak, and it stood as the national co-champion overcup oak for many years. The website of the Tuckahoe State Park, where this legendary tree once stood, says, the original plan was to dam the creek and create a 300-acre lake that would support a variety of recreational activities, including a marina, swimming beaches, and extensively developed recreational park facilities. Following the discovery of a national champion overcup oak tree, no longer standing, in the proposed lake bed, it was reduced to the 63-acre lake that exists today. Most of the original development ideas, including a hotel and a golf course, were shelved, and a typical stream valley park formed. I checked with the current Maryland State Coordinator, Jolene Catherine, and the Tuckahoe Oak passed sometime between 1990 and 1994, which means that the work the conservationists did to preserve it not only gave this tree almost 20 more years of life, they gave multitudes of generations past that life to all the critters and plants and trees that inhabit that section of the Tuckahoe Creek. The land now features a 400-acre arboretum, a nature preserve that includes wetlands, forests, and meadows. They host classes on local ecology, native flora, and natural history. For the otters, minks, raccoons, foxes, skunk, deer, and rabbits. For the wood ducks, and the black ducks, and the mallards. For the freshwater spawning ocean fish. For all the water-loving plants and trees. All were saved by the national champion, the mythical Tuckahoe oak, and the brave and clever conservationists who used that individual tree to galvanize the community. We can recognize the remarkable trees within our own backyards and the wilderness outside of our developed areas to the benefit of our communities, for us and for many generations to come. Long live America's champion tree. I have some references here, a few of the papers that I talked about that I referenced and the research that I checked out. And then here is how you can find us on the internet. My email is down there at the bottom if you have any questions. I think we've got plenty of time for questions. This topic always sparks some interesting discussion. So I wanted to hear from y'all. I know we've got some questions sent in ahead of time, so we can start out with those. Katie, if you wouldn't mind reading those out to me.
All right. So you kind of touched on these earlier, but here's a few questions we got. When did the Champion Tree program start? How many cities across the US participate? How can I find a listing of all champion trees in my area, and what comes from being pronounced a champion tree?
Yeah. So, yep, like I said, the Champion Trees program started in the 1940s. I think they put out the call for nominations in September of 1940, and then they released the first list in 1941 was the first National Register of Champion Trees. The Tennessee Champion Tree program started in the 70s, kind of focused on the same goal, competition to find the largest trees in the state. As far as which cities participate, countless, so many. Um, we have a national cadre of tree measurement experts, a group of people that love measuring trees and getting out there. There's only about 20 something individuals involved in that. That's something that we are working on growing. So if tree hunting sounds like something you would want to do, to volunteer to help measure these trees, go ahead and send me an email. We'll get you on the list for when that training is ready. We do have a lot of urban champions. Especially because that's where people are likely to see the trees, and where trees are open grown, like they don't have a lot of competition, and where they are protected, like in parks, graveyards, especially, not to be too macabre, but they get a lot of good nutrition and they're not disturbed that much. But we see them across the urban to rural gradient, even in more rural areas. A lot of our champion trees were missed by logging machinery because the terrain was so difficult. So sometimes they're tucked away in some really interesting patches of forest. But it is a great way to get city slickers out there looking at trees. As far as where you can find champion trees in your area, we are working on our database for the national website. So that should be ready either by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. But for the Tennessee state champions, you can check out championtree.tennessee.edu. I believe you can sort by county so you can see which ones are in your county. Yeah, and let's see, the last part was what does it mean when they're pronounced? What do they get for it, I think? It really is mostly an honorary title. I believe that we print out a certificate to send to y'all as the nominator and to recognize the tree. We're working on what's the best way to honor these trees without damaging the tree or leaving some kind of plastic sign to deteriorate in the elements. So right now it's just a certificate. A lot of individuals have created signs for their own champion tree. They also get a big ol' whoa, what a cool tree from me, which is a great honor because I only say that about most of the trees that I see. So, what you get?
Okay, next question. Do you have any stories, cultural tales, songs, or interesting facts about common West Tennessee trees to share with the public? They're looking for something to connect people to trees that they might see every day but didn't know about, such as oaks, tulip poplars, magnolia. This is a very long list of trees. I'm not going to read off every single species, but they were just asking if
Yeah,
you have any
yeah.
stories or cultural tales.
I have more interesting facts than I do stories or songs. I'll give you some facts about a couple trees, and then if we end up having a ton of time at the end, I can just start listing all the things that I know about all these species that you mentioned. So, one of my favorite Tennessee trees native to our area is the white oak. The picture that I used to talk about how we measure champion trees, how we award them points, that was a white oak, our 2021 champion. Um, the white oak has bark that kind of shingles at the top, like the shingles of a roof, and those shingles are the perfect habitat for bats. They love to roost in a white oak. White oak acorns are also smaller than some other acorns and sweeter because they produce acorns every year. The red oak group produce acorns every other year. So those acorns hold on an extra year. They accumulate more tannins. Some red wines have high levels of tannins, gives kind of a bitter flavor to the nuts. So the white oak acorns are generally pretty sweet. You can soak them in water to help remove some of the tannins and grind them into a flour, use them as a flour substitute in baked goods. It's a beautiful nutty flavor, really good in like a biscuit or a cookie. They can even be eaten raw, but again, with the tannins that they do have, they can be a little bit bitter. They're not people's favorite snack usually. As far as magnolias was another one that was mentioned. Magnolias are pollinated by bugs. For the trees and plants that are pollinated by wildlife, one of the ways that you can tell what wildlife pollinates them is by the shape of the flower. So southern magnolia has that beautiful broad bowl shape. That means that it was the beetles are like the favorite pollinator of the southern magnolia. And in fact, the southern magnolia evolved during the Cretaceous period, 95 million years ago. So it's one of our trees that we consider a living fossil. It's so ancient. It's so ancient that the beetles that originally pollinated it went extinct a long, long time ago. And this was before bees even existed. So yeah, another cool thing is that magnolias usually open their flowers in the morning and then close them up in the evening to trap the beetle inside, and they release more pollen at night in the beetle. It's kind of like those like shake and bake chicken seasoning things with the beetle and the pollen. It gets it totally coated in the pollen. So when they open the next morning, it flies to the next flower, and is, yeah, ready to help pollinate. So yeah, there's some fun facts about white oaks and magnolias.
Okay, next question. And this is from the Tullahoma Tree Board. What is the status of the Tullahoma Tree Board application for a champion ginkgo tree that's been submitted?
Yeah, so the Tennessee program measures their potential champions every summer and then awards them in the fall. So if your tree has not been measured yet, it will be by the end of the summer. I believe that they're planning on hitting East and Middle Tennessee sometime in late July, early August, maybe. They will send out emails to all of the nominators letting you know whether or not your tree is a champion uh, before the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council conference, which happens in October. Does that sound right? Something like that.
Be November this year.
November, awesome. So yeah, so if you haven't heard from them by mid-October, that would probably be a good time to check in.
And next question, do you have a favorite tree species and or a favorite individual tree?
My favorite tree species, whoa, it's hard to choose. I really love the white oaks. They are really beautiful and special and support their keystone species, support so much life. I do have a favorite individual tree in the UT Gardens. There's a weeping katsura tree that forms this beautiful canopy like the leaves just kind of gently brush along the ground. And I don't think you're supposed to move the chairs, but you can sometimes sneak a chair underneath there, and it's like a little cave. It's just so beautiful. Hard to choose a favorite. They're all really wonderful. Ginkgos are also way up there. Those beautiful fan-shaped leaves, another living fossil evolved millions and millions and millions of years ago. Hard to choose. Yeah.
Someone asked if you could re-show the reference slides or
Yes,
reference
absolutely.
slide again.
Yeah, I know I breezed past that one. There it is.
And while they're looking at that one, oh, and I think someone dropped this in the chat, but someone asked if you could restate the place to find the Tennessee champion tree listing again, but
Yeah. So you put it in there, championtree.tennessee.edu. If you Google Tennessee Champion Tree Program, I bet it'll come.
and it looks like Jimmy Miller, thank you. You dropped that link in the chat.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Here is another question. Is the white oak endangered? I had heard because of bourbon barrels. I heard Vandy was collecting acorns to help new growth.
So to my knowledge, the white oak is not listed as an endangered species, but I believe that those oak acorns that were being collected were for the Tree Improvement Program, which is a program run out of the University of Tennessee by Dr. Scott Schlarbaum. And they collect a lot of acorns because they are trying to grow better and stronger trees. They're kind of searching for the genetics that would lead to the healthiest, strongest trees so you can grow some really strong stock. I think that that's what those acorns were being collected for. I could be a little bit off on that. But the tree improvement program does a lot of that type of stuff.
And this is, let's see, unless anyone has another question, this is the final question I have. Do trees give hope?
I love this question. I love this question. Yes, yeah, trees give hope. I mean, some trees take 40 to 50 years to reach maturity. So that's how long it'll take before they start producing fruits and seeds. At that point, you are not planting a tree for yourself. You're planting a tree for the people that come after you. I always say, I'm not planting a tree for the next 10 to 15 years. I am planting trees for the next 100 years. I am planting trees for our grandchildren's grandchildren and society that they will inherit that we are building today. So anytime you plant a tree, that's a gift to the future. And to look around at the trees we have, those were often protected by choices made by the people that came before us. It's a gift from them. They kind of form this through line from centuries, even millennia ago, through to the future, to some uncertain future. But I believe in a future worth planting trees for. So yeah, I think so. I think trees give us a lot of hope.
Well, those are all the questions I have for you.
Right. Katie and Jack, thank you so much for going through that Q&A. I loved that last question. And I have another question to ask. I hate that it comes after that last one. But I did want to ask Jack, is there any moment in your life, whether as an adult or when you were young, where you felt like a particular story about a tree, or the way that a tree was humanized for you, where you kind of like where the light bulb kind of came on and you're like, wow, I feel connected now. And I guess, is there a particular story that sticks with you?
That's a great question. I mentioned Greenleaf, the tree that was halfway between mine and my best friend's house when I was a kid. That one especially, once we gave it a name, it was separate from all of the other trees in that forest. Uh, I think looking back, I think it might have been a tulip poplar, but it really it was a meeting place, it was a gathering space, a play place. That one was really substantial. I also think about the way that I got into forestry, period, was I was living out in Middle Tennessee, and I was working on my garden outside, and this random guy pulls up into my yard in a pickup truck. He gets out, he comes up to me, he's like, I see you out here a lot. You weeding? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I can't watch this happen to a state tree. And he stomps over to what he would identify as my tulip poplar as an adult, starts yanking down the vines off of it and telling me how the vines grow up from the ground, not down from the sky. And he gave a name to all of the trees in my yard. He told me what species they were, how to take care of them. And just that aspect of having a name to apply to them, even though it was the species name, not an individual name, I always describe it as it was like a veil was lifted and I could see all the trees of the world. So I do think there is a lot of power in knowing the names of these trees, being able to recognize individual species, and yeah, giving them an individual name makes them even more special.
I love that. Thank you, Jack. And I'm so glad that someone with your ability to communicate so in such an engaging way is in this role. And there's so much that I think everyone on this call can learn from, right? So so many people here who, work with the environment directly, whether it's research or tree care, maybe how we are connecting with people who are maybe not as like-minded, right, is a big jump. And so I hope that a bit of today's presentation, rubs off on us in how we communicate with others and tell stories that connect with us. Katie, is there any other questions that came through, or are we good to go?
I don't think so. I will just say Jennifer Smith said that the Metro Tree Advisory Committee collected the acorns at Vanderbilt for the Division of Forestry's East Tennessee Seedling Nursery.
Okay.
Oh yeah, the acorns might have been for the state nursery. Could have been that. Makes sense. Awesome. Thank you all so
right.
much. It was great to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you, Jaq. And a quick reminder to everybody, we do these webinars every month. And so next month, we have Dr. Yujan Chen from Tennessee State University presenting on the role of urban soil management and urban tree growth in long-term ecosystem services, based on some research done by Dr. Chen. So very excited to have her joining us. And then we also have, as we mentioned earlier, the annual conference. So in person, November 13th, we'll have workshops, and the conference will be 14th and 15th. That'll be held in Nashville. So for those of you in Tennessee or in the region who want to join us in person, we look forward to hopefully seeing you there. All right. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Jaq. Thank you, Katie. And we will see you all next month.